"It's my first night here," whispered the young Apache to the rancher, trembling with fear. The night was dark, and the wind carried a strange chill that made the branches of the trees sway like restless spirits. The young Apache woman ran as fast as she could, her bare feet cutting across the rough ground. She did not stop, even when her legs ached and her stomach screamed in hunger. She had been running for days. Days without food, without water, and without the comfort of knowing if she would live to see another sunrise. Every shadow seemed dangerous, every sound made her heart leap. Her people were gone, taken by the violence and chaos that had come to their land. She had no family left, no home, and no place to feel safe. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and sorrow. She remembered the last night with her family, the terrifying noise of shouting and horses, the smoke rising into the sky. She could still see the panic in her mother's eyes, feel the warmth of her brother's hand just before everything fell apart. Now she ran alone, guided only by the moonlight and the faint hope that someone, somewhere might help her. The storm clouds above began to gather, and the first drops of rain splashed on her face. They were cold, but somehow the rain felt like a small blessing, washing away some of the dirt and sweat that clung to her skin. She shivered but kept moving, knowing that stopping could be deadly. The wilderness was unforgiving at night. Wolves, wild animals, and worse, strangers with cruel intentions could be anywhere. Every step was a battle between exhaustion and survival. After what felt like hours, she stumbled into a small clearing. Her legs buckled under her and she fell to the muddy ground. Her chest heaved and tears mixed with rain on her face. She felt completely defeated. How much longer could she run? How much longer could she survive? She closed her eyes for just a moment, hoping that if she rested, the nightmare might end. But the forest did not stop moving. The wind howled and the branches cracked as if warning her that she could not hide forever. Just as hopelessness began to creep into her heart, she saw a faint light in the distance. At first, she thought it might be a trick of her tired mind. But as she squinted through the rain, she realized it was real. The light came from a small ranch house, modest and unassuming, but to her, it was like seeing a beacon in a stormy sea. She wanted to run toward it, but her body refused. Her feet were cut and bleeding, her clothes soaked and torn, and her mind clouded with fear. Summoning the last bit of strength she had, she crawled through the mud toward the light. Every movement hurt, but she told herself she could not give up. She had survived this long. She could survive a little longer. The light grew brighter as she approached, and she finally reached the edge of the clearing. There it stood, the ranch, quiet but full of life. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, and a warm glow came from the windows. She felt something stir inside her, a feeling she hadn't felt in weeks, hope. She paused at the edge of the clearing, unsure if she could go any further. She wanted to knock, to ask for help, but fear held her back. What if they chased her away? What if they were cruel like the strangers she had run from? Her heart pounded as she crouched in the shadows, trembling. She could not speak. She had not spoken much since she had left her home. Her voice had been silenced by fear, by grief, by the constant struggle to survive. Then she saw him. The rancher stepped outside, a strong man with a quiet presence. He carried a lantern, and when he saw her, he did not shout or point a gun. He paused, watching her with calm eyes, as if trying to understand who she was and why she had come here soaked and shivering in the storm. She froze, unsure what to do. Every instinct told her to run, but her body had no strength left. The rancher slowly approached, keeping his hands visible, showing no threat. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently, his voice steady and kind. She could hardly believe anyone was speaking to her with such care. She shook her head, too exhausted to answer, but tears streamed down her face. She whispered the words without meaning to, almost as if the wind had carried them out of her mouth. "It's my first night here." The rancher's eyes softened. He did not ask who she was or why she was here. He only saw a human being in need. He extended his hand carefully, giving her a chance to trust him without pressure. The young Apache woman hesitated, remembering all the times trust had been broken, all the times kindness had been used against her. But something in the rancher's calm presence told her that this time might be different. She took a small step forward, then another, until finally she accepted his hand. He helped her to her feet and led her into the house. Inside, it was warm and safe. The smell of firewood and food filled the air, a comfort she had not known in a long time. He offered her a blanket and a seat near the hearth. She wrapped the wet cloth around herself, feeling a small measure of safety for the first time since the tragedy. The rancher did not force her to eat, did not ask questions she could not answer. He simply sat nearby, giving her space while making it clear she was protected. The storm raged outside, but inside there was silence except for the crackle of the fire. The young Apache woman finally allowed herself to breathe. She was not safe forever, she knew, but in this moment she was alive. She was warm, dry, and not alone. For the first time in days, her mind began to quiet. She did not have to run, not tonight. She could rest, and that simple act of resting felt like a miracle. Through the long night, the rancher watched over her quietly. He tended the fire, brought her water when she needed it, and made sure the door was secure. He never asked her name, never pressed her for answers. He understood that trust could not be forced, and that sometimes safety was the first step toward healing. She felt the weight of fear begin to lift, replaced by a fragile sense of hope. As dawn approached, the young Apache woman slept, exhausted from the journey, from fear and from sorrow. The rancher stayed awake, watching the first light touch the horizon. He did not know what the future held for her or for himself, but he knew that this night had changed something inside both of them. Two lives, once isolated and afraid, had crossed paths in the vast wilderness, and that encounter would leave a mark neither could forget. The first night was just the beginning. It was a night of survival, of fear, of trust slowly being formed. It was the night that proved that even in a world filled with danger and cruelty, a small act of kindness could give someone the courage to survive. And for the young Apache woman, that night meant something she had almost forgotten. She was not alone. The morning sun filtered through the small windows of the ranch house, casting soft light across the room where the young Apache woman still slept. The fire from last night had dimmed to gentle embers, but the warmth remained. She stirred slowly, her body aching from the journey and the long night, but for the first time in many days, she felt a sense of safety she could almost believe. The rancher was already awake, moving quietly around the house. He filled a small pot with water, started preparing a simple breakfast, and checked the animals outside. Though he did not speak much, his careful movements and attention to detail showed his kindness. He understood that she needed time, space, and patience. Trust could not be forced. It had to grow naturally. When the young Apache woman finally opened her eyes, she felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. The room was unfamiliar, filled with things she had never seen before: wooden furniture, pots hanging from hooks, and a warm bed. For a moment she felt small and uncertain. Could she truly stay here? Would this man harm her like so many others had? But the calm expression on the rancher's face told her he meant no harm. He simply offered her a quiet smile and gestured toward the breakfast he had prepared. She hesitated, unsure if she could eat. Her stomach was empty, but the thought of taking food from someone she did not know made her anxious. The rancher noticed her hesitation and said softly, "Take your time. Eat only if you want." Those words were simple, but they carried weight. He was not demanding anything from her. He was not trying to control her. He was giving her choice, and that small act of respect spoke louder than any words could. Slowly, she moved closer to the table and took a small piece of bread. Her hands shook, but she managed to eat. The rancher did not rush her, did not comment, and simply sat nearby. She noticed how calm he was, how steady his presence felt. For someone who had only known danger and fear, that calmness was a strange comfort. She began to realize that here she could breathe. She could be herself, even if only a little. As the morning passed, the young Apache woman began to explore the ranch cautiously. She had never been inside a house like this, and every corner seemed full of new wonders. She touched the wooden table, ran her fingers over the smooth surfaces, and marveled at how organized everything was. The rancher watched her with patience, never pressuring her, simply allowing her to discover this small world of safety. Outside, the ranch was alive with sounds she had almost forgotten: the lowing of cattle, the chirping of birds, and the rustle of leaves in the wind. The rancher led her to the barn, showing her the animals, how to feed them and how to care for them. Her fear began to ease as she realized that this work, though simple, gave her a sense of purpose. She felt needed, and that feeling was something she had not experienced since leaving her family. Days passed, and a quiet routine began to form. The young Apache woman helped with chores, cooked simple meals, and learned the rhythm of the ranch. She still did not speak much, but her silence was no longer filled entirely with fear. She began to observe the rancher closely, noticing small acts of kindness that spoke volumes. He would make sure her blanket was dry, bring extra water when she was tired, and never questioned her if she wanted to be alone. Despite her growing comfort, fear remained a constant companion. She had lived in a world where kindness was rare, where trust was often betrayed. Every time someone approached her, she instinctively flinched. The rancher understood this, and he never forced her to speak or interact. Instead, he allowed her to move at her own pace, showing her that patience and respect could be as powerful as protection. One afternoon, as she worked in the small garden near the house, she noticed the rancher watching her from a distance. There was no judgment in his eyes, only quiet observation. For the first time, she wondered about him. Who was this man who offered safety without expecting anything in return? Why did he help her when others would have turned her away? She wanted to ask, but the words felt foreign on her tongue. She realized that speaking was not necessary to understand his intentions. His actions said everything. The young Apache woman also began to notice her own strength. Each day, she felt a little braver, a little more capable. She could carry water, feed the animals, and even repair small fences. These tasks were hard, but they reminded her that she could survive, that she could rebuild her life in small ways. The rancher encouraged her quietly, never praising excessively but showing approval through gestures: a nod, a gentle smile, a hand extended when needed. Evenings were the hardest. As the sun set and darkness returned, memories of her past would come rushing back. She would see her family, hear the chaos of that final night, and feel the sharp sting of grief. Sometimes she would curl up near the fire, silently crying, and the rancher would simply stay nearby. He did not ask questions, did not attempt to fill the silence with words. He understood that grief needed space, and that sometimes simply being present was enough. Over time, a quiet bond formed between them. She began to trust that he would not betray her, that his kindness was genuine. She could feel it in the way he moved around the house, the way he spoke softly, the way he never demanded anything from her. And slowly she began to speak in small ways: one-word answers, quiet observations, a hesitant question. Each word was a victory, a sign that her fear was losing its grip. The rancher, too, began to care for her in ways he did not expect. He had always lived alone, focused on his work and survival, but this young woman had awakened something in him: a sense of responsibility, a desire to protect, and a quiet admiration for her courage. He saw how resilient she was, how she faced each day with determination despite her fear and pain. And in turn, she saw that he was not just a man of strength, but of compassion. Life at the ranch was not without challenges. The young Apache woman still struggled with nightmares and memories that haunted her waking hours. She sometimes felt the urge to flee, to escape back into the wilderness where danger, at least, was familiar. But each time the rancher's steady presence reminded her that she had a choice. She could run, or she could stay and begin to heal. Slowly, she chose the latter, and with each choice her trust grew. By the end of the week, the rancher and the young Apache woman had formed an unspoken understanding. Words were not always necessary. Their actions and presence communicated far more than language ever could. She knew she was safe, that she had a place to rest, and that she would not be abandoned. And he knew that she was learning to trust again, that her courage and spirit were slowly returning. One evening, as they sat near the fire, the young woman finally spoke a little more clearly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. The rancher nodded, understanding that those simple words carried the weight of everything she had endured. They shared a quiet smile, an acknowledgement that a fragile bond had formed, built on patience, kindness, and the shared understanding of survival. In those first days at the ranch, the young Apache woman learned something she had almost forgotten. Not everyone was cruel, and not every stranger wished her harm. She discovered that trust could be rebuilt, slowly and carefully, through simple acts of respect and care. And the rancher, who had offered shelter without expecting anything in return, realized that even small gestures could create a profound impact on someone's life. As the sun set on that first week, the young Apache woman felt a small but powerful shift within herself. Fear still lingered, but hope had begun to grow. She had survived the wilderness, the storm, and the darkness within her own heart. And now, in the quiet comfort of the ranch, she had discovered that safety and kindness were possible. For the first time in many weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she could live without constant fear. Life at the ranch had settled into a quiet rhythm, but beyond the fences and fields, the nearby town remained a world of uncertainty for the young Apache woman. She had begun to feel safe within the ranch walls, but the thought of the outside world still filled her with fear. The townspeople were strangers to her, and she had learned in her short life that strangers often brought trouble. The rancher, who had become a quiet protector and guide, tried to prepare her for the day when others might notice her presence. He spoke gently, never forcing her to act before she was ready, but making her understand that life beyond the ranch could be harsh. It began slowly. A traveler passing by the ranch commented on seeing someone unfamiliar through the window. He mentioned it casually, unaware of how quickly news could travel in a small town. By the next morning, whispers had started circulating among the townsfolk. Some spoke out of curiosity, wondering who the young woman was and why she stayed at the ranch. Others spoke in suspicion, fueled by old prejudices and fear of the unknown. The young Apache woman sensed the tension before she understood its cause. When she stepped outside to help with chores, she noticed strange looks from a distance. Some townspeople would stop their work to stare, then quickly avert their eyes. Others whispered to each other, glancing toward the ranch. Every glance made her heart race. Every whisper made her retreat a little closer to the rancher's side. The rancher noticed her growing unease. One evening, as they tended the animals together, he paused and said quietly, "Some people may not understand why you are here. But do not worry. Here you are safe. No one can take that from you while I am around." His words, firm yet gentle, gave her a small measure of courage. She nodded, grateful but still aware that the world outside could be unpredictable. Rumors spread faster than she could imagine. Soon, some townsmen approached the ranch, not with kindness but with questions and suspicion. "Who is she?" one asked, his voice sharp. "Why is she staying here?" Another added, "She doesn't belong in our town. This is not her place." Their words, meant to intimidate, only increased her fear. She had faced danger before, but now it was different. This was a world that might judge her without knowing her story. The rancher stepped forward calmly, blocking the young woman from view. He did not raise his voice, but his presence carried authority. "She is under my protection," he said. "You will not harm her and you will not speak to her in that way." The townsmen hesitated, surprised by his firmness. They had expected fear, weakness, or submission. Instead, they were met with a man who would not bend, a man who valued justice and compassion over gossip and prejudice. Despite the rancher's protection, the young Apache woman could feel the tension growing. She had not experienced such hostility in weeks, and it reminded her of the danger she had fled. Every sound outside, the clip of hooves, the low murmur of voices, made her heart race. At times she wondered if she should leave, disappear into the wilderness where danger was at least familiar. But each time, the rancher's calm presence reassured her. He did not force her to confront the town. He simply stood by her, offering the kind of quiet strength she had learned to rely on. She began to notice subtle changes in the townspeople. Some avoided her completely, giving her wide space and cautious looks. Others were openly hostile, making comments just loud enough for her to hear. She could not understand their words fully at first, but their tone told her everything she needed to know. Fear returned, sharp and biting, as she realized that the safety she had found at the ranch was fragile, dependent on the rancher's presence and courage. Yet, amid the fear, there were small glimmers of hope. A few townspeople began to act differently. They would nod politely from a distance or offer small gestures of courtesy. The young Apache woman noticed these moments and clung to them as proof that not everyone in the world was cruel. It reminded her of the rancher's quiet kindness, teaching her that even in a world filled with suspicion, small acts of compassion could exist. The rancher, too, faced challenges he had not anticipated. He was a man of principle, and he could not simply ignore the town's curiosity and prejudice. Yet, he refused to abandon the young woman he had sworn to protect. Each confrontation, each whispered comment in town, was met with calm determination. He would speak only when necessary, but his words were firm, leaving no room for misunderstanding. She would stay, and she would be safe. Over time, the young Apache woman began to feel a mixture of emotions. Fear still lingered, but she also felt pride and courage. She had survived the wilderness, the storm, and countless dangers on her own. Now, she faced a different kind of challenge, a world that might not understand her, but one she could navigate with the rancher by her side. She learned to move with quiet confidence, to hold her head a little higher, and to trust that not all eyes were meant to harm. One afternoon, she watched a group of townsmen pass by the ranch. They whispered and glanced in her direction, but she did not retreat. Instead, she stood with the rancher, feeling the warmth of his presence and the quiet assurance that she was not alone. In that moment, she realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to face it with someone who believed in you. The bond between her and the rancher grew stronger as they faced these challenges together. She began to understand his quiet strength, the way he measured his words, the way he acted with patience and care. And he, in turn, began to understand her resilience, the courage it took to survive, to trust, and to face a world that was often unkind. Together, they were learning to navigate the delicate balance between safety and the outside world's uncertainty. Despite the tension, life at the ranch continued. The young Apache woman helped with chores, tended the animals, and even began to learn small skills that gave her independence. Each day she grew a little braver, a little stronger, a little more certain that she could face the world with the rancher by her side. Yet, she never forgot the whispers, the suspicious glances, and the sharp words. They were reminders of a reality that existed beyond the ranch's safety, a reality she had to acknowledge, not flee from. Evenings were quiet but tense. She often sat near the fire, reflecting on the day and the encounters with the town. Fear sometimes returned in full force, bringing memories of past loss and danger. But she also remembered the rancher's calm voice, his firm promise of protection, and the small gestures of kindness that had carried her this far. Slowly, she learned to balance her fear with hope, to hold onto the possibility of safety while remaining aware of the challenges beyond the ranch. One night, as she and the rancher watched the stars from the porch, she spoke more than she had in days. "They look at me and I feel afraid," she whispered. The rancher nodded, understanding her without judgment. "It is natural to feel that way," he replied gently. "But you are not alone. Here you have a place. You have me and I will not let anyone harm you." His words were simple, yet they carried immense weight. For the first time in weeks, she believed them fully. Days turned into weeks, and the young Apache woman began to adjust to this new reality. She could not change the town's opinions, but she could find strength in the safety she had at the ranch. Each encounter, each whispered comment or wary glance, became less frightening because she knew she had someone who believed in her. The rancher's courage and kindness became a shield she could rely on, a reminder that even in a world of suspicion and fear, she had a place where she belonged. Through all of this, she learned an important lesson. Courage was not just about facing immediate danger. It was also about enduring suspicion, prejudice, and misunderstanding. It was about trusting when trust was uncertain, standing tall when the world expected her to shrink, and believing in small acts of kindness even when surrounded by fear. And with the rancher by her side, she discovered that she could meet these challenges without losing herself to fear. By the end of this period, a quiet understanding existed between her and the rancher. They had faced the outside world's suspicion together, and both had grown stronger. She had begun to trust again, not blindly, but carefully and intentionally. And he had learned the depth of her resilience, the courage it took to survive in a world that was often cruel. Together, they formed a small, unbreakable bond, a bond that would be tested in the days to come, but one that had already proven its strength. Tension in the town had been building quietly for weeks. Whispers of the young Apache woman living at the ranch had grown louder, and now they were beginning to turn into demands. The townspeople could no longer contain their curiosity and suspicion. Many had talked among themselves, debating whether the rancher had the right to shelter someone they considered an outsider. Prejudice and fear made their words sharper, their stares more threatening. The young Apache woman could feel the anxiety in the air, even before the first confrontation arrived. One bright morning, as the sun rose over the fields, a small group of men approached the ranch. Their steps were firm, their eyes wary and suspicious. They carried no weapons openly, but their presence alone was enough to signal trouble. The young Apache woman froze behind the rancher as he stepped forward to meet them. He stood tall and calm, his eyes steady, ready to protect her without violence unless it became necessary. "Who is she?" one man demanded, his voice harsh and insistent. "Why is she living here? This isn't right. She doesn't belong in our town." Others murmured in agreement, their faces tight with anger and doubt. The rancher's heart sank slightly, not because he feared for himself, but because he knew how frightening this must be for the young woman he had sworn to protect. She clutched the edge of his coat, trembling, her eyes wide with fear. The rancher spoke slowly and clearly. "She is under my protection. You will not harm her. You will not threaten her. She has done nothing to you, and you have no right to make her feel unsafe." His voice was calm, firm, and unwavering. The townsmen looked at him in surprise. They had expected weakness, hesitation, or fear. Instead, they were met with a man who refused to be intimidated. Some of the men tried to argue, saying that the woman was different or dangerous. Others muttered about customs and old laws, but the rancher would not be swayed. "She is a human being," he said firmly. "She has a right to live safely just like anyone else. If you cannot respect that, you will leave this place." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that the men could not ignore. The young Apache woman watched this interaction with wide eyes. She had never seen someone stand so firmly for her before. Fear was still strong in her heart, but now it was mixed with something new: awe. This man, who had only been her protector and companion for a few weeks, was showing her that courage was not just about fighting with weapons. Courage could also be quiet, steady, and unwavering in the face of prejudice. The confrontation continued for a while, but the rancher's calm determination never wavered. He did not shout, he did not strike, but he made it clear that he would not back down. The men, seeing his confidence and the resolute expression on his face, slowly began to retreat. Some muttered under their breath, clearly unwilling to challenge him further, at least for now. The young Apache woman felt her heart slow. She was still frightened, but she also felt a sense of relief. She was safe, for now, and because he would not allow harm to come to her. After the men had gone, the rancher turned to the young woman. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded, though her hands were still trembling. I think so," she whispered. She realized that she had survived not only the wilderness and the storm, but also the suspicion and anger of the town. And she had done so because someone had believed in her, had stood up for her without hesitation. That evening, as they sat near the fire, the young Apache woman began to speak more openly. She told the rancher about the fear she had felt when the men approached, how she had wanted to run, to disappear, and how his courage had given her strength. He listened quietly, never interrupting, simply nodding and offering the occasional reassuring word. In his calm presence, she felt that her voice mattered and that her feelings were valid. Over the next few days, the rancher continued to support her. He allowed her to go about her chores, tend the animals, and help in the garden, all while keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. He did not pressure her to confront the townspeople or to explain herself. Instead, he showed her that strength could be quiet, that courage was not always loud or aggressive. The young Apache woman began to understand that she could face fear and uncertainty without losing herself, as long as she had someone she trusted by her side. The town, however, did not forget the incident. Some people still whispered and glared from a distance, but most had learned to leave the rancher and the young woman alone. Their respect for the rancher's steadfastness had grown, and even those who were slow to accept her began to recognize that she was under protection. Slowly, tension began to ease, though the young Apache woman knew it could return at any moment. During this period, she also began to notice her own growth. She was no longer trembling at every sound, no longer shrinking at every glance. Her hands were steady as she worked, her voice stronger when she spoke, her movements more confident. The rancher's quiet support had helped her regain a sense of self, a belief that she could survive and even thrive despite the dangers that had surrounded her. One afternoon, while working in the garden, she paused and looked toward the town in the distance. She remembered the fear she had felt just days before, the panic when the men had come to the ranch, and she realized how far she had come. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She could face it, and she could choose to stay, to be part of this place where she was no longer alone. The rancher noticed her gaze and asked gently, "What are you thinking?" She smiled faintly, a smile full of quiet pride. "I am thinking that I am not as afraid as I was," she replied. "Because you stood with me." He nodded, understanding that his actions had taught her one of the most important lessons of survival. That courage was sometimes about standing firm, even when the world expected fear. Evenings at the ranch were now filled with a sense of calm confidence. The young Apache woman could sit by the fire, reflect on her day, and feel safe in the knowledge that the rancher would always protect her. She began to speak more freely, sharing stories of her past, asking questions about the world beyond the ranch, and even laughing quietly at small jokes. Each moment of connection was a victory, a step away from fear and toward trust and belonging. The rancher, too, found that he was changed. His life, once quiet and solitary, was now filled with purpose and meaning. Protecting her had awakened a deeper sense of responsibility and compassion. He realized that courage was not only about facing danger, but also about showing kindness, patience, and understanding. He had stood firm for someone who could not protect herself, and in doing so, he had strengthened his own spirit. Through this experience, the young Apache woman learned that safety and trust could coexist even in a world that often seemed hostile. She discovered that fear could be faced, that courage could be quiet, and that one person's actions could make all the difference in another's life. And the rancher learned that standing up for what is right, even against pressure or prejudice, was one of the most powerful forms of courage. By the end of this period, the bond between them was stronger than ever. They had faced suspicion, confrontation, and fear together, and they had emerged resilient. The young Apache woman had begun to feel a sense of belonging, a place where she was not judged for her past or her difference, but respected for who she was. And the rancher had found a new purpose, a connection that filled his once quiet life with meaning and warmth. The days passed quietly after that, with only occasional reminders of the outside world's suspicion. But the young Apache woman no longer flinched at every glance. She had learned that courage could be quiet, trust could be rebuilt, and safety could be found even in unexpected places. The rancher remained her steadfast protector, and together they continued to face the world with calm determination, ready for whatever challenges might come next. After the confrontation with the townspeople, life at the ranch gradually returned to a calmer rhythm. The young Apache woman no longer lived in constant fear, though she remained cautious of the world beyond the fences. She had come to understand that safety was not only a place but a feeling, nurtured by trust and care. The rancher's steady presence had become her anchor, a reminder that not all people were cruel, and that kindness could exist even in the harshest of times. Each morning began with quiet routines. She would help with chores, feed the animals, and tend to the small garden. Every task she completed brought her a sense of accomplishment. No longer was she merely surviving, she was learning to live again. The rancher guided her patiently, showing her skills without demanding perfection. He understood that confidence came gradually, built on repeated successes and gentle encouragement. The young Apache woman had also started to speak more freely. Her words were simple at first, just one or two at a time, but gradually she began to tell stories of her past. She spoke of her family, of the land she had known, of the songs and traditions that had once filled her days. The rancher listened carefully, never interrupting, never judging. He asked questions only when she seemed ready and always with gentleness. In their conversations, she discovered that her voice mattered, that her experiences were valued, and that sharing them did not weaken her, it strengthened her. The townspeople, having witnessed the rancher's courage and the woman's resilience, slowly began to accept her presence. Though some remained distant, most ceased to whisper or glare. Curiosity gave way to quiet tolerance, and in a few cases, to tentative friendliness. A few townspeople began leaving small gifts or supplies at the ranch, a quiet acknowledgement of respect. The young Apache woman noticed these gestures, and though she did not yet fully trust them, she felt a flicker of hope that perhaps acceptance could grow over time. Even as the outside world softened, she continued to face her own fears. Memories of the past still haunted her, and nightmares occasionally stole her sleep. Some nights, she would wake trembling, heart racing, remembering the chaos she had fled. But now she had a place to return to, a shelter filled with warmth and safety. The rancher would sit quietly by her side until she calmed, offering comfort without intrusion. Through this, she began to understand that healing was not about forgetting pain, but about learning to carry it without letting it control her. Over the months, a deeper bond formed between the young Apache woman and the rancher. They shared moments of laughter, small victories, and quiet reflections by the fire. She learned to trust him fully, not only for protection but also for friendship. She discovered that he could be gentle, patient, and understanding, and that she could rely on him not just for safety, but for guidance, wisdom, and even joy. In turn, he grew to admire her resilience, her courage, and her growing ability to face the world with quiet strength. One afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, the young Apache woman paused to look at the land around her. The fields, the animals, the small house that had become her home, all of it represented a life she had thought impossible after her escape from danger. She realized that she had choices now. She could continue to live in fear, always looking over her shoulder, or she could embrace the safety and kindness she had found and allow herself to belong. Turning to the rancher, she asked softly, "Will I always be safe here?" He looked at her, his eyes calm and steady. "As long as I am here, you will be safe," he replied. "But more than that, you have learned how to keep yourself safe too. You are brave and you are strong. You have survived so much, and that strength will carry you forward." His words filled her with a quiet confidence. She realized that safety was not only given by others, it could also be created from within. The young Apache woman began to imagine a future where she could live without constant fear. She thought of planting more in the garden, caring for the animals, learning new skills, and perhaps one day helping others who were lost or in danger. She began to see that life could have joy, friendship, and purpose, even after tragedy. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. The rancher, too, reflected on the changes he had witnessed. He had always lived a quiet, solitary life, focused on work and survival. But the arrival of the young Apache woman had transformed his days. He had discovered a sense of purpose, a deep connection that filled his life with warmth and meaning. Protecting her, guiding her, and witnessing her growth had shown him the profound impact of kindness and courage. Together, they had both grown stronger, braver, and more compassionate. As time passed, the young Apache woman decided to make the ranch her permanent home. It was no longer just a place of refuge. It was a place of belonging. She chose to stay not because she was afraid of the outside world, but because she had found a life she wanted to be part of. She wanted to continue learning, growing, and contributing to the small community that had slowly accepted her. And most importantly, she wanted to remain close to the rancher who had stood by her when no one else would. Their days became filled with small joys. They shared meals, cared for the animals, and worked together in the fields. Sometimes they would sit in silence by the fire, content in each other's presence. Words were not always necessary. Their shared experiences, mutual respect, and quiet understanding spoke volumes. In these moments, the young Apache woman felt a deep sense of peace, something she had not known in a long time. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, she spoke softly to the rancher. "I never thought I would feel safe again. I never thought I would feel happy." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You have found strength inside yourself, and that strength, combined with courage and patience, has brought you here," he replied. "Happiness is something we create step by step through the choices we make." The young Apache woman smiled, a smile that carried relief, gratitude, and hope. She realized that her journey had not only been about survival, but also about learning to trust, to love, and to embrace life again. She had faced the wilderness, the storm, the prejudice of the town, and her own fears, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The rancher and the young Apache woman continued to live their days quietly, but with a new sense of purpose. The ranch was no longer just a home. It was a symbol of resilience, courage, and hope. They had faced hardship together and had learned the importance of trust, kindness, and standing up for what is right. Their bond, formed through shared struggles and mutual respect, had grown into something profound and lasting. The story of the young Apache woman's first night at the ranch was no longer just a memory of fear and uncertainty. It had become a story of survival, trust, courage, and quiet triumph. She had discovered that even in a world filled with challenges, it was possible to find safety, friendship, and belonging. And she had learned that the smallest acts of kindness, when paired with courage, could change lives forever. As the seasons passed, the ranch continued to thrive. The young Apache woman became skilled in her work, confident in her abilities, and respected by those who had once doubted her. She and the rancher faced each day together, their lives intertwined through shared experience, mutual respect, and the quiet knowledge that they had each saved the other in different ways. In the end, the story was not one of grand heroics or dramatic battles. It was a story of survival, of trust, of courage, and of quiet hope. It was about two people who, through kindness and patience, found a place where they could belong. And it was a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope could shine through. And sometimes, the most important act of bravery was simply to stand by someone when the world expected fear. The young Apache woman had survived the storm, the wilderness, and the prejudice of the town. But more importantly, she had survived fear itself. She had discovered trust, courage, and belonging. And as she looked out over the ranch, the animals grazing peacefully in the fields and the warm light of the house behind her, she knew one thing with certainty: she was home.